Welcome to the Tales of Osteopathy students with myself, Chelsea, and my dear friend V. How you doing, V?
I'm so good. We're here. We're back for episode 3. And thank you so much for everyone who's listened to the podcast so far and has supported us on social media. We're so grateful.
Yeah, super grateful. We're so pumped for this
Yeah.
all the time. We get really excited and we're loving that you guys are loving it as well, because that's all we ever wanted.
Yeah. It's all we ever dreamed of.
All we ever dreamed
Ever
of.
since I was a little girl.
Ever since I was a little 5-year-old girl, when I learnt about osteopathy for the first time.
It reminds me of those sub stories on X Factor or The Voice, and they're like, ever since I could walk, I wanted to be a singer. It's like, what? That doesn't make sense. Shut up.
I know. I used to joke and say, I was like, I swear they just throw salt at their eyes or something just to make them cry when they go through to this stage to try and make it you have to connect with them emotionally. It's
I know.
My pet hamster got run over by a steamroller.
Stop it, I'm going to bawl.
So, what have you been up to this week?
I've been working more than 9 to 5. I've had a busy old week. I was telling Chelsea the other day. I work in a bar, so we've had some interesting people come in, and it's attached to a sports club as well. And this poor old man, he came off the pitches and was like, yeah, I feel really rough. Was sick in the bathroom for half an hour. And then he was like, oh, I'm all good. Can I come into the bar and have a drink? And I was like, I salute your dedication to wanting to have a drink. But no, you can't just come in while we're serving food and all of that sort of stuff when you've just been hurling your guts up in the bathroom and I've had to bleach everything and stop everyone going in the bathroom. I'll be absolutely hated. So that was the highlight. And my medical story is essentially based off my colleague getting antibacterial gel in her eye.
Oh.
And honestly, her eyes were swollen and red, and she was dropping drinks everywhere. And I was like, is she going blind or what? And it's luckily I had a first aid kit in the boot of my car, and it had some eye wash and stuff like that in it, but she was suffering. So it's been slightly eventful, but we're all good.
It's been one of those crazy weeks, huh?
Yeah, and Chelsea and I are excited because we're getting some news back on when we're eventually getting back to uni so we can see each other in person.
Yeah, we've had big news this week on what's happening with our university, which looks like we might actually see each other in person in September when we go back. So providing there's not a second spike. So hey everyone, stay inside. Let us go back to uni, please.
And wear your face mask properly, please. Not just covering your mouth and not your nose. Not covering your neck and not any of your face. Not hanging off your ear and not even touch your face. Please wear it properly. Please.
It is honestly ridiculous how many people I see with their noses hanging out. It's you are literally voiding the entire point.
Also, I saw, in that film, what is it? It's the one with Jude Law, the Christmas one. Somebody will let me know. But he puts a handkerchief over his face or a napkin, and he's Mr. Napkin Head. But somebody put a tissue, a Kleenex sort of tissue over their face, and they had glasses on in the supermarket. And I was like,
oh my God.
Oh, wow. I know people are pretty impressive sometimes, but that's next level dumbassery.
Yeah. That's pretty spectacular.
Funny times.
I got myself some handmade ones.
Ooh, nice.
Which has got a jungle print on it. It's pretty cool.
Ooh, very tropical to go with your plant mama status.
Oh, so a plant mama. I'm deep in plant mama territory.
Yeah,
right now.
We're both big plant people. I think it's just because we can't actually interact with patients at the moment or other people in general. I've just dedicated myself to plants, and now it's just got a bit excessive, hasn't it, for both of us?
Oh yeah. I bought an aloe vera plant, and when I bought it, it had loads of pups on it. So the pups are when it starts growing other little mini ones underneath it.
Yeah.
I separated them all out, so I had 10 aloe vera pups, and I obviously named them all something beginning with V. So
Hello.
V has obviously got her own little aloe vera plant named after it. And shall I tell you what? She's thriving. She's doing real well.
Yeah, I am.
What have you got for your tea today?
I have got an iced coffee, which I'm actually surprised that I've drank this far. I was going to tell you earlier, but I've accidentally put salt instead of sugar in this. But I was like, I'm so fucking desperate to have caffeine because I'm so tired that I was like, it's not that much. Like, I've only put like a half teaspoon, but I'm like, this is the issues I get when I don't get more than like 7 hours sleep because I need sleep, and now I'm just putting salt. What a great bartender I must be. Just mixing salt and sugar. Oh, fuck's sake.
I love that. Do you realise now, though, this is our 3rd episode, you haven't had a cup of tea yet?
It's just too hot. I know. It's so fucking hot. I've had to move into my brother and his girlfriend's. They live in London, so it's okay for me to use their bedroom. I have to move like bedrooms. I'm sleeping in their bedroom now just because it's over 25 degrees most of the time. It's like, you'd never know that I lived in Australia and was like absolutely loving it. Because England is not made for this heat, people. I hate to complain because it's very cliche. But there's no AC, like all the houses are fucking insulate the shit out this hot weather. And it's like, you could be sat in a bikini, like inside your house. And my dog's like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, just baking under 2 air conditioning units.
I'm very lucky in that this is the first house I've ever lived in that stays really cool in the summer.
Mm.
So it's like wasn't it like we did our first episode, I was sat there in a jumper and you were in a vest top, just like,
yeah, you were wearing like a roll neck.
Gotta stay snugly and warm.
To be honest, ever since I was a teenager, like even at school and stuff like that, when we're in the house at home, I'd be like in a bikini or in like swimwear and stuff like that because I just run really, really hot. Like I'm just constantly in swimwear because why not? Treat your life like it's a beach and all that sort of stuff. That sounds like it should be on a shit coaster or something. If you can make that, I would love that coaster. Any listener.
Send it in. Gifts always welcome.
What have you got there? It's looking very murky green, like pond water status.
Well, this tea, I tell you. Also, this is the problem with having this. So I'll paint you a word picture, listener. So if you go to a bar every now and again, a pub that has like cask ale, and you have a pint of beer in a jug, you know what I'm saying? Yes. So it's like a big glass with a handle on it. That is what I drink my tea out of. And generally tea is kind of brown in colour. I don't have milk. So sometimes I'll bring it out and people are like, are you having a pint of beer? It's like, no, this is tea. This is tea. So yes, it's very murky coloured today. But so I've got another yogi tea today.
Oh, nice. What's the mantra today?
Oh, it's very nice. Today's mantra is very nice. Compassion is a state of constant giving of the self for others.
Oh, that's cute, isn't it?
It's very nice, isn't it? And it's choco mint.
Oh, damn. That sounds good.
It's good. It's very good. I have a box in my locker at uni that I can't get to, and I've just drank my last one of this.
No, you are like tea lady. Like we have 4-hour-long sessions because our part-time course you do like 9 to 6 on a Saturday and Sunday. And Chelsea, like whenever we have like a little break in those 4-hour lectures, she's like, tea? And I'm like, tea? Yes, because I never remember to bring anything. And you'll just like open up your locker and it's like, oh.
Yeah, my locker is essentially a tea cupboard.
Yeah, it's great.
In a nutshell, because hey, gotta have tea.
Gotta
have tea.
Okay, Chelsea, so today we wanted to talk about bones, our fun little guy bones. We want to talk about classification of bones first, because those help us sort of organise where we are in the body.
Yeah, absolutely. So since in our last little anatomy part of episode 1, we were talking about different terminology, we wanted to grow your glossary, so grow your anatomy glossary today by talking a little bit more about the bones. And since, hey, what does osteo mean, B?
Bone.
Osteo means bones, so we do a lot with bones, so we thought it'd be cool to talk about the bones. Classifications of bones. V.
So we have oh dear, that's not a word, 5 classifications of 5 types of bones. So you have long bones, short bones, flat bones, irregular bones, and sesamoid bones. Sesamoid. So long bones are bones like your femur, your humerus, which is where your biceps are, so in your upper arm. And your short bones are things like your carpals and your tarsals, which are small bones in your hands and your feet.
They're like tiny little, almost like cube-shaped things, aren't they? They're like super tiny bones. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's some really fun ways to remember like the order of those and that sort of stuff, which we'll go into later. Mm-hmm. And you've got flat bones, which are found in sort of softer parts of the body. Those are like ribs, your scapula, your skull bones, and that sort of thing. And then you've got irregular bones like your vertebrae and sesamoid bones, which are tiny, tiny, small round bones that are enclosed in tendons or fascial tissue. And they're found, like there's a sesamoid bone in your hand. There's 2 sesamoid bones, like on big toe is on the ball of that joint.
Yeah, and you all know the biggest sesamoid bone, which is
Of course.
your kneecap, the patella.
Yes, the patella is not my favourite. I love the knee joint because I've had issues with it, but I think my patella is a naughty little dickhead and needs to learn its place, is to stay in one place and not keep moving about when I'm running.
Oh, they love a little shimmy shim.
Yeah, a little shimmy of the patella. It's always fun, not painful at all.
Not at all. 5 different classifications of bone. What's your favourite?
I think because I love neuroanatomy so much, I do love the flat bones in the skull because I just think they're so interesting how they form in embryology or stuff like that. And whenever I hear about any accidents or surgeries or like old medical cases, then it's, this like huge bolt of whatever went through his skull and he lived because it didn't touch this or this. And I'm just like, this is so cool. But obviously I love irregular bones because they're part of what the vertebrae are.
Yes, I think the bones of the skull are mental. They are mental. You take those bones apart and there's some crazy shapes. There's one shaped like a butterfly.
Yeah, when you're doing neuroanatomy and you look inside of the skull and you're looking at all the holes that the cranial nerves go through and all of the routes that cranial nerves get to so that you can do all of your bodily functions, it's like, phew, mind blown, quite literally.
Literally. This might be too deep, but I find it absolutely crazy when you say stuff. It's like, my mind's been blown by my own mind and what it does every day. It's just like the most egotistical thing ever. It's like my brain is saying, I'm fantastic.
Yeah, and you're just like, well, yeah, you are. We are made out of incredible things.
Yeah, so I appreciate you, brain. Thank you. Thank you for all your work.
Yeah,
I think the vertebrae are definitely probably my favourite because they're so varied in terms of, from the very top all the way down to the bottom. But yeah, we've got a fun way of remembering the different sections of the vertebral column.
Your spine, your vertebral column, which has your vertebra in, can be divided into sections. For your neck, you have your cervical vertebra, which are really good at doing all of the movements that your neck needs to do. And we have a fun way of remembering that. What is that, Chelsea?
Yes, so you've got your cervical spine, your thoracic spine, your lumbar spine, your sacrum, and also your coccyx, which is what make up your vertebral column. And the cervical spine are 7 in number because what time should you have your breakfast?
7 a.m.
7 a.m. And what time should you have your lunch?
Midday at 12 o'clock.
12 o'clock, that's your thoracic spine, 12 thoracic spine. And what time should you have your dinner?
5 p.m.
5 p.m, lumbar vertebrae, 5 big old chunky lumbar. Yeah. And then we've also got 5 in the sacrum, but they are fused.
Yeah.
And then depending on how many coccyx you might have, it might be 3, might be 4.
Yeah.
Depends on the person.
It depends, which is a common phrase at our university and in osteopathy. It depends, because anatomy and osteopathy is all up in the air, up for conjecture. It's all up for interpretation a lot of the time, or yet to be confirmed.
It's one of those things, isn't it? Is that all of our anatomy is based on back in the day when anatomists started, cutting open bodies and having a look to see what's inside. And obviously in terms of that, the people that were available to them were white males. So well, even today we're still limited in terms of female anatomy, in terms of people of colour and things like that. It does depend on the person still, because we don't want to cut everyone open.
Yeah, to be fair. Yeah, because I mean, all of the advancements we've made today, I feel like we were speaking about earlier, but we've forgotten all of the sacrifices that were made in the past to attain all of this knowledge, either through people volunteering to have like a hole drilled in their head to see what was going on, or like bloodletting, that they first found out how that was working, and all of these sorts of things, and people knowing that they would go to prison for grave robbing, but needing to find out like about this thing and this thing so that we can make advancement in medicine. So all of the times that you're complaining about how this thing, they should know how to cure it, or they should know how to treat this by now. And it's like everything is trial and error in medicine and anatomy and physiology. Fucking hell. Physiology. So just got to have a little bit of patience.
There's still so much we don't know about the human body, but there's still so much we do. And it's an incredible... I'm looking at my skeleton now, Cedric, and I'm just like, it's an incredible feat.
Yeah. Talking about Cedric, I always think it's really, really funny because when I was in one of your yoga classes a couple of weeks ago, I had my skeleton in the background. And when we're saying our skeletons, by the way, we've got like plastic model skeletons.
Yeah, they're not real humans.
Yeah, we haven't got literal skeletons in our closet.
Yeah.
We've got practice like plastic skeletons to learn anatomy on. And I was like, I need to put my skeleton out of the picture. My other classmates in your yoga class are going to think I'm an absolute weirdo having a skeleton in the background in my room.
I think it's all right. I think they know, because Cedric's made some guest appearances on some yoga classes. It's just really useful to have. Do you know where this part of the... Okay, let me just get Cedric and I'll show you.
Yeah, let me just get the bones out.
So on bones, we've got loads of bony prominences as well.
Yeah.
So these are little different kind of markings or little sections of the bones and things like that generally have muscles and things attached to, or they're, something of importance. It's where they're joining to other bones or muscles are attached and things like that. So there's lots and lots of stuff going on with the bones.
This year I finally got round to sort of like putting all of my many notes on everything into like a big anatomy and physiology dictionary to have all of the terms in there. So I've got a long old list there's lots of different words used for different types of shapes of prominences and markings and grooves and all of that sort of thing, which help to identify the attachment points and the origins of muscles. And it really helps when you're trying to identify which muscle moves which part of the body or that sort of thing, to know which part of the bone they're attached to and where they originate. And often these are attached to things that stick out a bit, so it makes it a bit easier for the muscles to join onto them.
Yeah, they stick out a bit. They're a bit grainy, easier things for things to attach to. And we're going to be talking a little bit more about that stuff in our osteopathy tale later.
Lovely.
Yes, but attachment points are super important. And I tell you what, as an osteopathy student, is one of my biggest challenges.
Oh God.
Is how many muscles we've got in the body, V? 604?
I don't know.
Like
I'll be honest, I don't know. I haven't done any anatomy stuff since our exam in March, whenever it was.
April, yeah, it was beginning of April.
Yeah.
We need to learn the attachment points for all the muscles. So this is the origin and the insertion. So these are the places on the bones in the body where all the muscles attach. And oh my goodness, it's a lot.
Yeah, I've got to tell you, it's so complex because you don't just have like when somebody's talking about their quads, which is short for quadriceps, this is a collection of 4 muscles, and they each have like different origins and attachments and insertions, and like the quads go onto the patella and then into a ligament onto your tibia, and it's like there's a lot of steps, and it's humbling to know how complex muscles are in order for them to work properly, and fascinating for when they go wrong, what's happened to them.
Yeah, it's a huge deal. So it's like we're going to talk a little bit more about these attachment points again later, but essentially I'm going to take one of my favourite muscles because I think it's crazy. It's the psoas
Ooh,
major.
Yeah.
silent P, obviously.
Yeah.
to begin with. Where we were talking about the lumbar vertebrae before, so we've got 5 lumbar vertebrae. The psoas muscle is attached. So if you just picture your back, now we're doing another one of Chelsea's imagine it on your body moments.
Yeah.
So picture your back and you've got your lumbar vertebrae. So it's the top 4, the superior 4 lumbar vertebrae and the bottom thoracic vertebrae, which we've referred to as T12. So it's like L1, L2, L3 and L4. So it's attached there. And imagine it coming kind of through your body, coming through your hips, and then attaching to the very top inside part of your thigh. That's the psoas. You think about it, you're like, oh, that is interesting.
So a really, really huge muscle.
Huge muscle. And also it's just, also when normally we think about muscles, we think about them being like around the edge of bones. You know, they're kind of like, you've got your bones in the middle and you've got muscles wrapped around you. Like think about like your arm and stuff. You don't think about it passing through structures and things like that originally. So that's a really interesting one. And the psoas muscle, you know, it's affecting your lower back, it's affecting your hip flexion. So this is, say, if you're stood up and you bend your knee and lift your knee up towards your chest, that's your hip flexion. It affects loads and loads of different things, but it's quite interesting how all these different things attach and connect together.
Yeah, exactly. I think later on when Chelsea tells us about an osteopathy tale, she'll be talking about the psoas muscle and its role it plays in there.
In regards to muscles as well, since we've been talking attachment points, muscles we tend to learn in terms of a group of muscles, like V mentioned the quads, so the quadricep muscles, which is a group of 4, which is on the front, the anterior part of your thigh. On the posterior part of your thigh, you've got your hamstrings, which you all know so well, which is made up of 3 muscles, which I quite like the names of, which is semitendinosus, semimembranosus, and also bicep femoris as well. So you got biceps in your legs and your arms, did you know?
There we go. There we go. Who knew?
Who knew? So we're super, super used to just learning them in isolation of that group of muscles that have this particular effect on a joint. You've got your hip flexors or your hip extenders and things like that. So that's normally how we learn them in isolation. So in a bit when we go into anatomy trains and things like that, it'll be like, what?
Yeah.
It's very interesting how it all works.
A tip for anyone who's starting to learn anatomy or who's struggling to learn anatomy is to learn the Latin and Greek prefixes and suffixes. Yeah, again, we're talking about the language of anatomy and physiology. So when you're learning, say, the muscles involved in the neck area, often muscles get split into sections so that you can learn them easier. So you have the triangles of the neck, which is one of my favourites because it's a really complex area. Often lots of the muscles, say there's a muscle in your neck called the omohyoid muscle, which omo means shoulder. So you can see that there's a hyoid bone in your neck. That neck muscle, the omohyoid, attaches to the shoulder and to the neck hyoid muscle. There you go. So it just makes it a little bit easier to imagine the area that the muscle is in and where the direction of the muscle fibers go and that sort of thing. So it's really interesting in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Another example of that is something like subscapularis. So, for example, you've got your scapula and sub means below, so you know it's the muscle below the scapula.
Yeah.
Things like that.
They do try and help you out, don't they?
And sometimes it's, I discovered this, I'll name it after myself.
Yeah,
Just to
yeah,
make
exactly.
it a bit more difficult. But generally, sometimes things are named after things. It's like this, so you can show where this muscle is attached to that. Same with kind of ligaments and tendons and things as well. It does really help to just learn all the bones to begin with is a really good starting point. Bicep femoris that we just mentioned. Bicep meaning 2 heads. So you've got two heads to it. Femoris meaning the femur. So it's goes along the femur.
Yeah. In the quadriceps, there's the rectus femoris, isn't it? And femoris meaning femur and rectus means straight. So if you're looking for a muscle, you know that it's going to be a straight muscle attached to the femur.
Yeah.
So pretty easier to explain it like that.
Yeah, when you break it down like that, it doesn't seem so terrifying. I mean, that's 602 more to go.
I know. There's quite a few. Don't even get me started on the muscles in the forearm because there's so many layers.
You were so upset about it. I remember before we even started, you're like, this is a nightmare, by the way.
Yeah.
Get ready for it.
I've learnt it so many times and I still really, really struggle with it. That's the only time that I feel like dissection really, really helped, but it is disgusting. So, Chelsea, what is our osteopathy tale for today?
I mean, I feel like I've teased you all a lot in the anatomy section about...
Yeah.
Been like, we're going to talk about this more, get ready. Whilst we were in lockdown, actually, and V, I don't think you were able to attend, so I don't even think you know this full story yet.
No, I actually don't.
It makes it even more exciting. Obviously, lockdown came, we were still in our academic year, and we had a couple of online lectures, and we had one of our lectures with a tutor who, first of all, she's awesome.
She really is.
So knowledgeable and is such a good teacher as well. She really takes time to explain things properly to you in a way that just always cements in my brain. So big shout out to her. I won't say her name in case, she doesn't want us to share information, but
yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for all your help. So we had an online class, and essentially it was doing some practice questions around what's something we might come across later during our osteopathic student career with a patient, things like that. And just a couple of questions throwing out there. So if a patient came to you with this, what would you do? How would you justify doing this and that? And one of the questions that we had was justify working on the lower ribs to relieve ankle pain.
What?
And I think I can speak for the whole of our class when we all sat there like, what are you talking about? Just tumbleweeds.
Is this a trick question?
Yeah, literally tumbleweeds going through the Microsoft Teams meeting. Just, yeah, so we were all kind of just like, we've got no idea what you're talking about. And obviously this tutor being who she is, she sat there waiting for us to talk like, come on, what you got to say? Come on. So we're all kind of sat there in silence and just sort of squeezing our little brains to try and figure out what's going on. And then she brings up the subject of anatomy trains. So anatomy trains are trains of anatomy through the body. It does what it says on the tin, literally. So like we said before, normally when we learn anatomy, we're looking at certain locations within the body. So say, the quadriceps, okay? We look at the quadriceps, the hamstrings, we're looking at hip flexors, arm extenders, all this sort of stuff. So that they work together to do this one movement for that particular part of the body. That's normally how we learn it. But in reality, everything is connected in the body. Everything. Where we were talking about before, where you've got different connection points, so we've got these attachment points on the bone that are for different muscles to insert or where they originate from. You've got muscles that will insert into that and muscles that will originate from that. And what these anatomy trains are is they go through these bony areas, they go through the fascia in the body as well, so they're all connected in some way, so they all have an effect on the body. And so when you say something crazy like lower ribs and ankle, and normally you'll just be like, it makes no sense to me. There is a way that those two things are connected. And so the first thing being is that our tutor said that this was an actual patient that she had in clinic. Had this ankle pain for years and been to see a physio, had done all this stuff, done all the things she should have done, like icing and elevating and doing these rotational exercises and all the sort of things that you should be doing, but she still had this pain. Our tutor had done an assessment of both of her ankles and compared the two, and there wasn't really any difference. By saying that both ankles are very similar, it would say that there's not an issue with the ankle at the joint itself, okay? That's coming from somewhere else. It's something we talk about in regards to referred pain. So this being where there's a problem at another part of the body, but the pain is being felt in a different part of the body. She started to work her way up the body, and then she clicked and remembered that whilst taking her case history previously, because she had been a patient of hers for a while, she remembered mentioning that she had asthma and asthma attacks.
Okay.
Yeah, so V, asthmatics.
Yeah.
What would you say their breathing pattern is like?
Oh, do they have a lower rib breathing pattern?
The opposite.
Upper rib breathing pattern.
Have an upper rib breathing pattern.
There we go. Either one.
Yeah. Always one or the other. You may have heard of upper and lower rib breathing patterns, and this is essentially where sometimes you ask someone to take a deep breath in, their chest will lift up. Okay, that's an upper rib breathing pattern. If they take a deep breath in and it's their, say their belly expands, you see their lower ribs expand. That means they have a lower rib breathing pattern. And generally asthmatics have an upper rib breathing pattern. So they're not utilising their diaphragm to the full potential. So the diaphragm being that sheet of muscle that sits underneath your lungs. And when you take a deep breath in, it pushes down to create more space for the lungs so more air can come in, therefore expanding the lower parts of the ribs. And when you breathe out, the diaphragm pushes up and the ribs come back together. So the diaphragm is attached to the 11th and 12th ribs, the costal margin, which is if you look at it on your body, you'll see where your ribs, they kind of go at an angle from the center down towards the side.
Yeah.
Something called your xiphoid process, which is, again, another one of my favourite names.
It is a good word, isn't it?
Yeah, which is just a little point at the bottom of your sternum, so in the middle part of your ribs. And also, it's attached to the top 3 lumbar vertebrae. So 1, 2, and 3.
Okay.
Yes. So like we were talking about before, the psoas muscle, right? Where was that attached to?
To those...
The T12, L1, L2, L3, and L4. Yeah? So the diaphragm's not being used correctly. The lower ribs aren't moving. Okay? So we've got that attachment of the diaphragm onto L1 to L3, and also the psoas muscle is attached to there. So then that comes through and attaches to the top inside bit of the thigh, the lesser trochanter of the thigh.
Yeah.
Okay? And if we start to look at what we call the deep front line, in terms of the anatomy trains, there's one called the deep front line, and looking at all the muscles that run through there and how they're all connected together. From the psoas muscle, which is attached to the very top inside bit of the thigh, which is the lesser trochanter, also the fact that that muscle crosses the hip joint. So any muscle that crosses any joint affects the joint. That's one thing that's really important to remember. From there, we can go down to the medial femoral epicondyle. So you've got your knee, right? You can see a knee. You can look at it right now. I'm sure most of you can see your knee. And if you touch either side of it, you'll feel you've got a little bony bit sticking out of the side, just at the top, just above where your knee joint is. Those are your epicondyles. Okay, so your medial one is on the inside, lateral is on the outside. Yep, so from the lesser trochanter of the thigh, which is at the very, very top on the inside of your thigh, all the way down to the medial epicondyle, so it's just that straight line. From there, we have this kind of tract of fascia, okay? There's also lots of muscles and things. You've got your adductors and everything that happen around that kind of area. So all of these are affected and kind of work together. Then from there, we have the fascia of the popliteus. That's kind of the capsule of the knee. Okay, it's all attached into that area. You can see that bit, the medial epicondyle, is all kind of where the knee is. So you've got that attachment there. And then from there, you've also got the superior posterior tib-fib joint.
Cool. Break that down for me, Chelsea.
Let's break it down. Superior at the top. Posterior at the back.
Yeah.
Tibia, big bone down your leg.
Yeah.
Fibula, little bone on the outside of your leg. Okay, so you've got your tibia and your fibula. Okay, so those 2 bones that are in your leg, and they're attached at the top and at the bottom.
Yeah.
So at the top you've got the superior joint, and at the bottom,
inferior joint.
The inferior joint. Whew, brain. At the back of that, we have a muscle attached to it, which is called the tibialis posterior, and that muscle goes down the back of the leg, underneath the foot, and it affects the flexion of your toes. So when you bring your toes, you bend your toes in and straighten your toes, it affects the flexion of your toes. So just to run through that again, because I know that was a crazy amount of information. You've got your diaphragm, which is then attached to the psoas muscle, so attached at the same point as the psoas, which then attaches to the top of your thigh, where you have got a trail of fascia and lots of muscles and things that all come down towards the knee that affect the medial epicondyle. And then around your knee, you've got this capsule. And then just on the slightly lateral side of your leg, you have your superior posterior tib-fib joint, which has got a muscle called the tibialis posterior, which runs down the back of your leg. Tibialis as in the tibia, posterior as in on the back of it, which runs down the back of your leg underneath your foot and flexes your toes. What happens when a muscle crosses a joint, V?
It affects the joint. It
affects the joint. So that muscle, that tibialis posterior muscle, affects the ankle. Okay, and so from that connection, I know it's just like minds burgeoning to explosion. Because of that, all of that training of anatomy, our tutor with her patient did some adjustments to her lower ribs because she felt that restriction and tightness within her lower ribs from being an asthmatic. The patient stood up and had no ankle pain for the first time in years.
Bloody hell!
I know, right? It's ridiculous.
Cool. That's actually insane, because this is the sort of thing that people are like, you're making this shit up, like it would have been something else. But when you actually learn anatomy and appreciate the complex nature of that and how you talked us through that anatomy train, you can so see how a issue with her asthma affecting her diaphragm and all of the links on from that could affect and cause her ankle pain.
Yeah.
That's amazing that our professor was able to see that as well.
Yeah, amazing. It's just a testament to how much knowledge she has and how awesome she is, just because she was able to see that and connect it. And that's the thing, is that we need to kind of also think about the body as a unit. That's what's so important about osteopathy, is it's not just like, oh, you've got a pain in your ankle. Oh, no, it doesn't feel like it. Oh, it'll be fine in 2 weeks. Don't worry.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's something obviously going on somewhere in your body. How can we find that? Start from the bottom and work the way up. I should preface the fact that this lecture obviously happened online. We're all sat there like minds exploding at the time. So I referred to the Anatomy Trains book itself to get that train of anatomy to go through the process. So it may have been a case of that our tutor at the time told us it was different muscles, but I've taken this specifically from the Anatomy Trains book, which I'll obviously add the link to and just put pictures on the old socials and things so you can have a little nose.
When I grow up, I want to be like her.
I know, me too.
Yeah, because you see so many people who are like, oh, you've got a headache, you've got pain in your ankle, or you've got this or that. Like, take 2 paracetamol, do some stretches, maybe rest it for a couple of hours, like don't do sport for a couple of days, that sort of thing, and you'll be fine. And if it's not fine, oh, sorry about that. When you're actually wanting to fix the root of something, it's so important and impactful on that person's life, because you're actually, when you explain it to them as well, they can appreciate the complex nature, and it makes it less frustrating when you understand the complex nature of an injury or something like that, and the steps that you have to do to recover from that and rehabilitate that. It's so impressive, isn't it?
For me, I just remember being sat there like, what are you fucking talking about? This is incredible. And I literally bought the book the next day. I was just like, super fast delivery, please. Thank you very much. Pre-warning, if you do buy the book, anyone, there are pictures of dissection in there, because obviously we're talking about the body and how it's connected. And it's so easy to see. It's like one of the first pictures they've got in there is from the top of the back of the head all the way down to the feet.
Wow.
All the way down to the feet.
Okay.
It's incredible. It's just kind of course, it's all just one bit that you can take away,
Yeah. Yeah.
It's incredibly interesting. If this particular book has been put together specifically, not even for osteopathy students, but for movement professionals, as they're kind of called. So anyone who teaches like yoga, Pilates, PTs, all that sort of stuff, for just to understand more about the body. So it's super accessible and really, really interesting.
Yeah. As a pre-warning for anybody who's buying anatomy books and stuff like that, we'll actually have resources page on our website or on social media so that you can see some of the books that we love and have found really useful.
Yeah.
But because the nature of anatomy, you have to learn about everything. When you're flicking through and you're on the train to university, quite often you'll just turn the page and there'll be like a dick on the page, and it'll be talking about like the functions of like the penis, are like blah blah blah, and what the blood supply there, and blah blah blah, and like the lymphatic system and how that works in the mammillary glands and like the breast tissues and stuff like that. And it's just, oh, for fuck's sake. I'm on a table of 4 back in the day when there weren't all these restrictions, and I've turned the page and there's a dick or there's boobs on the page, and I'm looking through and I'm making little notes, and like there's men in business suits looking at me like, what are you doing, you fucking weirdo? It's 6 a.m. and you're looking at penises on the train.
There's so many anatomy like YouTube channels and stuff that are really awesome, and just catching up on the train on the way to uni, having a little watch of something, and of course there's going to be some form of nakedness that appears.
Yeah. I was watching a recorded colonoscopy the other day, and it looked so weird. I was on my lunch break and I was like, I want to know how this works out, like blah, blah, blah. I know a couple of people who have had this done. And it's obviously, I'm not a squeamish person at all, so I can have my lunch while watching a video about colonoscopy. But my colleague was like, what the fuck are you watching? Like, you're literally watching a tube like inside somebody's bowels and you're like eating soup, like la 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 la. I think you just get used to it though, don't you?
Yeah, and also normally people that say stuff like that, they'll probably be eating meat. I'm like, you're literally eating dead flesh. Like, shut up.
Yeah,
You know,
shut up.
just like it's not that much different, really.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely went off duck completely after dissection because it's fucking weirdly similar. So like whenever we're going down like the local Chinese and stuff like that, I'm like, I can't look at hoisin duck the same way. Thank you very much. I don't need that in my life.
I've got a feeling, V, you've got something fucking gross to tell us.
A fair warning to you, listener. The medical case today is about eyes. And
mate.
I know at the best of times people are squeamish about things that I think are fairly normal, but eyes is one that I can understand why people are squeamish. So if you don't like things about eyes and you're driving or something like that, like pull over or listen to this later, because it's a gross one. So I'm going to be talking about a procedure today, a very, very interesting procedure that I found out about a couple of years ago when I was a student nurse. And it's called Modified Osteo Odonto Kerato Prosthesis.
I already hate it.
Yeah. But as soon as somebody says like anything to do with eyes, like I was doing my eyeliner on the train because I have a patience of a saint and a very still hand, and I can do winged eyeliner wherever you put me. I was looking at this procedure, and to break it down for you, so osteo, as we spoke about earlier, means bone. Odonto means tooth. Kerato means horn or cornea, which is a part of your eye. And prosthesis is obviously a device, either external or implanted, that substitutes for or supplements a missing or defective part of the body. After talking to a patient in the waiting room, because I was bored and I was a student nurse and I was waiting for my patient to come out of having an MRI, she was telling me about this procedure that she was hoping to get in a couple of years' time. And she was blind herself, and she'd been blind for several years, like 9 or 10 years, due to something that affected her cornea, which is the transparent front part of the eye that covers like the iris, the pupil, and like the anterior chamber. To shorten this procedure, it's called MOOC or Mu KP, which is just like the initials. It's an option for people with corneal blindness, which has not been amenable by conventional eye surgery. And it's the end stages. They've tried everything else. There's no possible other thing.
Already anything that says this is your last resort. This is the end stage. If nothing else works, we'll try this.
Yeah. And at this point, because I looked it up essentially as soon as I could after this woman had explained why she wanted to get it. And I was like, this is fucking cool. And she said, like, at that time, there's only been about 600 operations had been undertaken. So it was so small around the whole world, not in the UK, just the whole world. In 1963, this procedure was developed by Professor Giancarlo Falcinelli. I hope that's right. Sorry, Professor. And he taught this at many, many institutions over decades. But there's only a small number of treatments done, and like the safety remains unconfirmed. And other doctors have their reservations about how safe it is because you have to have a sizable team and several operations. What it is, they remove a tooth from the patient's jaw, the person who's going to have the surgery. No. And they use that tooth to implant into your eye so that you can see again. And I'll explain the procedure. Because I've later found out that there's a professor called Professor Christopher Liao, who's a consultant ophthalmic surgeon based in Hove, near Brighton.
Hey!
And he learned Italian and travelled to Italy in the 90s to learn from Professor Giancarlo about this. So the surgery takes place over 6 months, and there's 2 surgeries. So the first is they remove the damaged ocular tissue, cornea, before transplanting inner mucosal lining of the cheek onto the eye's surface. So they're using moist tissue that's dense in nutrition over the eye to cover up that exposed, damaged area.
Yeah.
And then they remove a canine or a premolar tooth with some bone, so part of the maxilla bone.
So it's not just like a tooth extraction thing?
No. I saw a video on YouTube, which was quite gruesome, actually, even for me. It was really up close and personal, and it's quite a big part of their bones. So they're trying to get the most like nutrient, blood-rich supply.
If you say it's gruesome for you, I would probably throw up whilst watching it.
Probably. It was quite gross. I was, I might not have beetroot and stuff like that in my salad today because it was like a bit bloody or like juicy. And I was like, no, this is a bit too far. So they take that tooth and the part of the maxilla and they take that out of the patient who's having the surgery and they chisel it down into a square shape. And they put a hole in it to fit in a plastic optical cylinder into it, which is the like device that the patient's going to be able to see through. So this tooth bone cylinder amalgamation thing is implanted either into the patient's cheek, or I've heard a couple of instances where it was like implanted into the chest, shoulder area. So this is for the damaged tissue to repair and to grow like a new blood supply system. And so that the body in future won't reject it when it's implanted into the eye socket. That stays in there for several months. The second surgery is they remove that and then the cheek lining over the eye is perforated. And the tooth bone cylinder device that they've created is inserted into the eye. So they line it up with the retina. And this is all, their blindness is caused by damage to the cornea, but their retina and the optic nerve, which comes into the back of the eye, are still in good condition. So the lining is closed and now light can enter the eye through the plastic cylinder. And the vision should be restored within a couple of weeks when the patient's eyesight stabilizes.
I don't even think I can vocalise my facial expression right now.
Both disgusting and amazing, and it's just one of those things that I just think is the perfect example of why humans are so intelligent, medicine's amazing, surgeons are so impressive, and how somebody thought that this would work to begin with, I will never know.
Literal insanity. It's absolutely mental how something like that works. Is the patient awake?
Yeah, they're asleep. It's not like a laser eye surgery when you're awake. I know. Pretty fucking cool. Yeah, so that's just one of the procedures that I just think is like next level amazing. So there's been instances where somebody's been blind for, like I watched like a BBC like news channel from like 2001 and this man, Sean, had been blind for years. I think most of his life, I think it was like 25, 26 years or something like that. And he had 2 daughters. He was obsessed with cars and stuff like that and always dreamt of being able to drive sports cars. And they did this treatment on him. And obviously because they're using lining of the cheek, it doesn't look like a normal eye. Like it does look a bit gruesome. Yeah. But compared to being blind for the whole of your life, and you can now able to see, and like he was able to see his daughters smiling, and he's learned how to drive. And he's got himself a big old posh sports car and stuff like that. And there's 2 women who've had it done who've been able to see their grandchildren for the first time. It's just amazing. I think it's just next level stuff.
It is totally amazing, but
it is disgusting.
It's fucking horrible.
Yeah, and you can understand like why there's only been like a small amount of procedures done. Yeah, as well. But so amazing.
Whew.
Yeah, it's a lot to process. Somebody's tooth is implanted into their eye with a little cylinder plastic thing inside, and somebody can see.
Why is it their tooth? Is it because it's a natural part of their body?
Yeah. Like it wouldn't work. I don't think it would work if it was somebody else's tooth tissue, because the body would just reject it because it's too foreign and it's your eye, obviously. The tooth is removed and like stored in your cheek or your shoulder and stuff like that, so it can grow new blood supply so that the body doesn't reject it as well. But so amazing.
That is amazing. Horrible, but amazing. I think that's the summary of our podcast though, isn't it? Hey, tooting my own horn. Horrible.
But amazing. Yeah. Okay, so for this week, I wanted to ask about the different types of yoga because I know you can get loads and loads of different ones. And like my friend's done puppy yoga, which I'm like, wow, this sounds like heaven on earth. Bikram yoga, which is the one where they shove you in that hot room and you're sweating your life away. And that just sounds like the worst thing ever. Can I get you to explain to me like the different types of yoga and some of their benefits and why somebody would focus on those or the others?
Sure. I love that you've just mentioned the two types of yoga that are probably the most controversial. Just off the bat. First of all, like all the different types, you've got a different, when you look at a yoga schedule, you've got all these different names for classes. These all exist within one realm of yoga. So there are technically 4 different types or 4 different paths of yoga that you can follow.
Okay.
The first one you've got Raj yoga, you've got Jnana yoga, you've got Bhakti yoga, and you've got Karma yoga. Okay, so karma, we've all heard of the word karma. Karma literally means action. So the path of karma yoga is through action. So it's about volunteering and helping people without you wanting to get something in return. Bhakti yoga is all about love and devotion. And it's talking about love in terms of not romantic love, it means unconditional love. The way that I always use to distinguish the two is a lot of us are in relationships with our partners, yes? And we all put conditions on that. We'll say it's unconditional love, but it's not. It's conditional. Because, for example, if your partner said to you, said that they cheated on you, most people would probably leave them. That's a condition of your love. So a condition that you guys will stay within a relationship together is that you promise not to cheat on each other. It's like when you get married, right? You set out your vows, you set out your conditions of your relationship. Unconditional love is like the love a mother has for their child. There is no other emotion that fills their heart apart from love. If they saw a car coming towards their child, they wouldn't hesitate in throwing themselves in front of that car to move their child out of the way and would sacrifice themselves to save their child. That is unconditional love. Nothing else fills your heart apart from love. So that's kind of talking about Bhakti yoga, is going down the path through you just show love to everyone and everything. Jnana yoga is the yoga of knowledge. You want to go and you do lots of study, self-study, reading lots of books, acquiring lots of information. And then Raj yoga is the physical aspect of yoga. This is where all the different types, as it were, classes and things of yoga exist within the Raj yoga sort of area. You've got things like Hatha yoga. So it's H-T-H-A. No, sorry, can't even spell. It's H-A-T-H-A. So lots of people say Hatha, but it's actually Hatha yoga. This is kind of probably the most ancient, most traditional form of yoga. You generally will hold poses for between 5 to 12 breaths within a class. It's quite stable, it's strong. You do a lot of strengthening. It's not easy, but you get to understand the poses a lot better because you're holding them for a longer period of time. The most common one that we've talked about all the skinny white women like doing is Vinyasa yoga. Vinyasa yoga technically kind of isn't really a type of yoga. It's derived from something called Ashtanga Vinyasa. Ashtanga Vinyasa yoga is a set sequence that it doesn't change from that at all. And Vinyasa means flowing or movement. So within Ashtanga Vinyasa yoga, in between poses, you'll do a vinyasa, which is where you kind of go through that fluid sequence of you're in plank pose, you come down to the floor and you go into up dog and then downward dog and then you jump back through. That's taking a vinyasa.
Okay.
And with that, so that is where vinyasa yoga is derived from. It means to flow. So you're flowing in and out of poses all of the time, going from one to another. It can be kind of detrimental to your joints. It's very active. It's more kind of dancey. And that's what a lot of people seem to like. It's more like a Pilates kind of style thing as well, essentially. You've got things like yin yoga and restorative yoga, which are scrumdiddlyumptious, which is where you hold poses for a longer period of time and they're generally down on the floor. You use lots of props and different things like that to help support yourself, like cushions and blankets and things.
Oh, yeah.
And
that sounds ideal.
Yeah, it's lovely. And you hold the poses for a longer period of time. You've also got crazy things like Kundalini yoga. So within yoga, you have this thing called Kundalini energy, which is where it sits kind of at the base of the spine and is represented by, say, Shakti or a snake. And Shakti is a goddess and her male counterpart is Shiva, and Shiva sits within your head. So you want to get Shakti to reach Shiva. Okay.
Is that
And
anything to do with chakras?
It is very much to do with chakras, yes.
I'm so impressed
So-
with myself right now.
Yes. So with the Kundalini energy, essentially, you have these things called nadis, which are like channels of energy through the body. They're now kind of linked to sort of nerves and things as well. So you have one through the center called the Shashuda nadi, which is essentially your spinal cord. And what you want to do is you want to get that Kundalini energy all the way up through your spinal cord. But sitting throughout your spinal cord is your key chakras. And if your chakras are blocked or they're not spinning at the right frequency, then the Kundalini energy won't go up, okay? So Kundalini yoga is about forcing that energy up through the spinal cord. So there's lots of jumping. It's all kind of very sexual in some aspects. It's kind of interesting. Bikram, do you know about him?
No, I have no idea that it was a him or a who.
A guy called Bikram created Bikram yoga, which is again a set sequence, which is done in a really hot environment. He has been charged with sexual assault of a lot of different people. There is a Netflix documentary about it. He's kind of like fled the country and things, but he came to America and popularized Bikram yoga, and now you'll see hot yoga and things like that where you do it in a very hot environment. It's quite controversial in terms of Bikram yoga. So the important thing is that you need to find the right yoga practice for you, your constitution and your body. So we've talked a little bit about the doshas last week. So if we take Vata, for example, so people that are dominantly Vata are more likely to have more space in air running around their body. They're generally very tall, very thin, slender, long limbs, yeah? Painting a picture for you?
Yeah.
What happens with these kind of, you almost think of it like now within the West, like these traditional yoga practitioner types will go to a vinyasa yoga class. What is vinyasa? Very fast, flowing, moving. That is just going to aggravate your Vata even further than it already is. So if you're someone that's got problems with your joints, if you find you get like a little bit achy, you need more stability, you don't want to be doing vinyasa flow. If you're kapha dominant, vinyasa is a great class for you, because generally people who are kapha, they're a little bit slow, sluggish, they don't really want to move, things like that. So going to a vinyasa class is great for them because it's going to be kind of the opposite of that. If you are more Vata dominant, you want to go to something like a Hatha yoga class. It's more stable, you're holding the poses for a longer period of time, or to a restorative class because it's just going to help bring the balance. If you're Pitta dominant, someone who's naturally very hot inside the body, you don't want to go to a hot yoga class. Not for you, not going to be fun. Again, you want something that's more stable. You want Hatha and restorative again as well. People who are Vata dominant and who are Kapha, they're generally cold. A hot yoga class would probably be good for you. So it's all about finding the balance that's right for you and your constitution, essentially. There's not necessarily any bad yoga, there's not necessarily any good yoga. I just think the important thing is that we honour the heritage of the practice, which is why puppy yoga, beer yoga, naked yoga, all this stuff is a no.
Sorry, did you say beer yoga?
Oh, I'm not shitting you, yeah, beer yoga. You're
Surely.
in like Virabhadrasana 2, Warrior 2, with a beer in your hand and then take a sip. It's outrageous.
I'm sorry, but the whole aspect of practicing yoga is surely for your health benefits, and then you're drinking a pint. I'm all for drinking at appropriate moments and of course in pint mugs, but drinking beer whilst doing yoga, surely the two shouldn't marry up.
No, it's just the West, isn't it? We ruin everything.
Yeah.
We take stuff and we ruin it. That's what we do. It's one of those things, isn't it? And also, it's one of those things I go back and forth between. Because, for example, it might be someone's access to yoga. Something like puppy yoga. It might be the first time they've ever seen it and they've enjoyed it, and then they go and seek out what real and traditional yoga is. They might end up doing that. But at the same time, it's like we need to make it more, acceptable, more known, more about traditional yoga. And also knowing that yoga is not just about being on your mat, it's about being off your mat as well at the same time. It's a way of life. It's not an exercise regime. It's not, Pilates is just exercise. If you like just doing exercise, you just want to lift heavy things, great. Go to a gym, go to a Pilates class. If you want to know about the full thing of yoga and what it really is, and it's a whole lifestyle, a whole philosophy of living, then come to a yoga class, come and practice some yoga. Them's my thoughts.
Yeah, them's the thoughts.
Them's my thoughts.
That's a wrap. Okay, episode 3, done and dusted.
Bow, 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 bow.
Thank you for listening, everybody. We'd love to hear what you think of the episode and of the other 2 episodes as well, and let us know your feedback at our email at TOOSpodcast@gmail.com, and come and follow us at TOOS Podcast on Instagram, Twitter, all of those sorts of things.
Also, please do like, rate and subscribe. We'd very much appreciate it, because if you give us your feedback publicly, then more people will get to find us and more people get to listen to our beautiful, joyous voices talking as much as we can about anatomy in a logical way. We want to hear your stories about how, osteopathy has kind of changed your life and made it super fun, whatever you want to tell us.
Yeah, we'd love to know.
Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. We hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day, week, and we will see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.